Hello everyone, and welcome to today's discussion about the DC Primal Age action figure line made by Funko. So what is DC Primal Age, you're wondering? Well, that's a new line that's practically taking two very famous properties and mashing them together to create a completely new line. So practically, DC Primal Age takes the DC heroes and villains and the Masters of the Universe style of figures, and when they mash them together you get the DC Primal Age figures. So this is a packaging of one of those figures from Wave 2, and it would be from Bizzaro. Now I wanted to show you this as a sample that in reality, when you look at the card art as well, is very much reminiscent of the vintage Masters of the Universe card packaging, because it has this explosion in the center, the logo is right up here, and in the sense of looks, it's not just the figures but also the packaging itself that's reminiscent of the vintage Masters of the Universe action figure packaging. So some of the characters that came in this particular wave, meaning Wave 2, would be Superman, Lex Luthor, the Flash, Black Manta, and Bizzaro. Now the Wave 1 was originally supposed to be, and it was for a time being, an exclusive to Amazon only, and it consisted of 8 figures, 2 creatures, and a castle. So the Wave 1 consisted of, and it's still consisting of, the Batman, Joker, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Scarecrow, Mr. Freeze, and King Shark. Now the 2 creatures that came with the first wave are the Joker's sort of a dinosaur lizard creature that has a big throne that he can sit on it, so that he can sit on top of the creature, and then Batman's Bat-Hound as Batman's loyal pet. The size, both of the creatures are the size of Battle Cat and Panther, roughly. And then of course the playset itself, which is the Batman's Batcave, reimagined as a sort of a medieval fantasy castle. Now I don't have any of those from that previous wave because they're sort of rather difficult to get these days, and the for a time being, these figures from Wave 1 were only available and exclusive to Amazon, but as of late they have been starting to show up in the Target stores in the United States as well. So now they're not considered exclusive anymore, and certain comic book stores are carrying them as well. So on to the figures then from Wave 2. What we have here in front of us is Superman and Flash. Let's start with Superman here. Superman was made rather well, although I wish they did a bit more better work on his face. I'm not so sure it came out too well, but it's not that bad. It's just that I sort of imagined it a little bit better than what it is. But oh well, it's still good. And he came packaged with only one accessory, which is his shield logo, practically molded as a clip-on shield that can only go to his clip on his right wrist. And he also came with a spiked mace that's molded onto his left hand, and it's not removable, so there is no alternate hand that you could just unplug the mace and then put the human hand instead. So he will just constantly have this mace attached to him. And his cape is made of soft rubber, and unlike countless and countless Superman figures from various companies, this particular version of Superman actually does have the Superman logo, which is such a rarity to see on Superman figures in general. So he has a nice, crisp looking Superman logo on the cape, which makes me so happy because I honestly don't like to see Superman's cape being just plain red with no insignia whatsoever. In regards to the articulation, he is pretty much done the same sort of way. If you had any vintage Masters of the Universe, then same points of articulation pretty much, with some slight differences. So let me just show you. His head can turn left and right and all the way around. The arms can go up and down, and the arms on my figure pretty tight, so it takes a bit of effort to just move them up and down a bit. So I suppose they've been tightened quite a bit. He has movement in the waist. Now, that movement in the waist, there is a difference compared to the vintage Masters of the Universe figures. Now, that difference is that in the vintage He-Man figures, the waist was spring-loaded, so that most of the figures of the vintage He-Man could do a power punch when you turn them sort of it, and then they come back swinging with their hand. Well, these figures do not have a spring-loaded waist, so they do not have that feature, and as a matter of fact, none of these figures have any kind of action feature whatsoever. So they were just made in a sort of a plain way to be sort of like imitations in a way, or a tribute to the Masters of the Universe, but minus the action features. They also have articulation in their legs, but mostly over here by the furry pants, because that's another thing that they copied from the vintage He-Man, that these characters would wear the furry pants, and it would be in the same sort of sense that would sort of resemble the vintage toy line. Now the thing is, I don't like to move legs too much. They can move sort of sideways in order to sort of make them as if they would sit. The problem with the legs, or at least some of these figures, especially specifically Wave 1, that some people have been reporting that some of the legs would break if you move them too much, because unlike the vintage He-Man figures where the legs were connected with a piece of rubber in between, and that would make their legs easily move any which way, the legs of these figures are actually not connected with rubber, because I guess that's considered an obsolete way of doing it. They're connected with a sort of a ball joint that has the plastic connectors in between. But those little ball joints don't seem to hold the legs very well, at least as far as the Wave 1 goes. The Wave 2 is supposed to be a vast improvement. So some of the figures in the first wave would simply come with their legs already falling off, or the plastic pegs inside the waistline would simply snap, so that you wouldn't be able to put the legs back on unless you just reglue them. So yes, but they can still stand properly on their own, as you will see, and there is nothing wrong with them standing as long as you find the right pose for them. I just wouldn't advise that you move the legs way too much, because that might cause the attrition of it to just, for the pegs to just snap and the legs to fall off. I would also like to mention that the cape is not removable, so it's molded on, sculpted on, and he also has this sort of a cross belt with his Superman shield on his chest, which is also not removable, and it looks like it's just intentionally slightly slanted to one side, which is fine, and has this nice golden lining all around it, including the belt itself. So yes, it's reimagined to be as if in a fantasy sword and sorcery kind of setting, so he is well done for what he's supposed to represent. Now, along with the figures and the playset and the creatures, there is one more creature that comes in Wave 2, and that would be Crypto the Superdog. That's also the size of a vintage Battle Cat, and that one is also out there. And I understand that the first wave of figures also came with an exclusive 100-page comic book that tells the story of the DC Primal Age and what's happening in that alternate universe of in regards to the characters that were made into toys. So I understand that that comic book is exclusive to Target stores in United States only. So yeah, now I will also use this chance to show you side by side here comparison of the Superman and the vintage He-Man figure. So you can also see some differences, at least visually speaking, between them. Let's put Flash over here for a moment. So here they are, and the interesting thing is that both Superman and He-Man did share a comic book together back in the 80s. That was their first of several, their first joint comic book, where Skeletor, using his magic, managed to bring Superman to Eternia and put a spell on him to fight He-Man for him and to defeat him so that he could take Castle Grayskull. So that was their first encounter. These days, Justice League did manage to encounter the Heroic Warriors and He-Man, and they had their own story to tell. But yeah, so aside from this, would be the first time that that there was a Superman figure that would match in size and style the vintage He-Man. Now you can tell that there is some notable differences. I have the impression that just by looking at him that Superman is a bit more chunkier, somewhat chunkier in appearance, larger head compared to He-Man, and the body looks somewhat a bit bulkier, while He-Man's is more muscular. And you can also notice the differences in the thickness. In the thickness of the body is one thing, the thickness of the hands, and of course the legs as well. You can see that He-Man's boots, for example, are sort of thinner, more leaner in appearance, while Superman's are more thicker and bulkier looking. And of course He-Man comes with more accessories compared to Superman. And as I already mentioned about the waist punch action feature, which Superman and his friends do not have. So for those of you who are not familiar with the action feature I'm talking about, most of the vintage He-Man figures would have an action feature that would always be built into the waist. So you would do it either forward or backward, and then they would just come back slamming with their weapon or with their hand, except the feature is not working that well in my He-Man figure because he's quite old already as he is. So yes, in that regard, that's another difference. And of course, I would also state that the other difference is that He-Man's armor could be removed, and for many of the figures in the vintage line, they could remove their harness or armor or whatever they're wearing for the most part, while the ones in the DC Primal Age cannot remove their armor because it's sculpted on. So that would be a sort of another difference. Another thing that's quite the same in regards to the DC Primal Age is what I mentioned earlier, is that they have imitated the style of furry pants to represent Superman in a sort of a more barbaric way. So let's move on to the next figure in the wave, and that would be Flash. Now Flash was reimagined sort of in between, I would say, in between a barbarian look and something in between also a sort of a little bit of Greek mythological look to him due to his style of headgear. But he looks rather well. He's made pretty much on the same type of mold. He has the lightning symbols on his costume, especially on the bracelets that he wears. And he comes with one weapon, which is this short type of sword that's shaped like a lightning, which is Flash's symbol. And just like Superman, he has a cross belt that has the lightning shield molded onto it. And you can also see the lightning on the side of his head where the ears are. And this crown is not removable, it's molded on. And this belt, this cross belt, is also not removable. He can also move in the waistline, just like Superman, same type of articulation as Superman. And the head turns left to right. So yeah, he would be done in pretty much the same style and the same mold as Superman. Now, aside from these two fellas, there is also a few bad guys. There is Lex Luthor, who is reimagined in this sort of manner. He is wearing his classical armor, just not in green. It was changed into a sort of a more violet color to it. And he also comes with a mace, just like Superman, and he comes with no actual weapons or shields. So this mace is colored green to represent kryptonite that he could use to fight Superman. And there is a big green gem installed in his chest. He has this armor that resembles the one he wears in comics, and the armor is not removable. Again, same mold, same type of articulation, and he looks just as awesome as the other two fellas, so he's really well done. And to show you as a comparison, Skeletor from the vintage He-Man line and Lex Luthor. So again, they would be very compatible together, just like Superman and He-Man, and they would be good to display together in your action figure collection. Then the next one among the villains that was made in DC Primal Age is Bizarro. Bizarro is pretty much, again, the same type of mold with the same type of articulation, except with a new head sculpt. And he also comes with Superman's shield with the letter S in reverse in silver color, and also with the silver hand mace. But as you can tell, the mace is on the opposite side because everything with Bizzaro is sort of in an opposite way from Superman. He also has a cross belt with the Superman shield in reverse in silver. He also has a raspberry purple cape, violet cape that has also the Superman's insignia, but again in reverse. And his head can also turn left to right, and he has a very zombie-like face on him, which looks pretty scary and pretty well done. They really got him 100% right, and he looks pretty good. And then the final one that comes would be Black Manta, the enemy of Aquaman. Now, Black Manta again would be done in the same style because they're all using pretty much the same mold in both waves, except for one character, which would be Wonder Woman, because she's the only lady that was made in the line so far. Other than that, he has an enormous head due to his helmet that was replicated, and that helmet has some detail, especially for the eyes, and then the hoses that go all the way back. And yes, he does have a tank that connects at the back, and the tank is not removable, so it remains plugged in permanently. He also has this the wristbands that have some spiky details on it in gold color. He comes with two weapons, which are the sort of they look like hunting knives, or Black Manta usually uses a variety of weapons for underwater fights. So this time he comes with just two short swords. And he is done predominantly in black color because his costume is always in black, and the head, even though it's so large, it can still turn left to right. And the rest of the articulation is the same as the other figures. So yeah, these are pretty neat looking figures. The only major issue that I understand is kind of coming under control would be the quality control regarding the legs at the waist, in the sense of legs being a bit fragile in some of these figures. But other than that, they are actually pretty good, and they fit very well with the vintage He-Man toy line. And aside from the DC Primal Age, the only other figures that are pretty much done on the same idea would be Funko's Savage World, that covers the horror characters from the horror movies, and there is only one wave of those that consists of Freddy Krueger, Mike Myers, and also the Jason Voorhees, and Pinhead from Hellraiser, and there is one more, yes, the Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So those are done in the same style. Unfortunately, I cannot show you those particular ones because I don't have any of those. But yes, those guys are also out there, done in this same style, and sort of done in the sword and sorcery kind of style as well. So yes, and then I understand that Funko is planning to put out some more of these characters. I'm not sure will they continue DC Primal Age or will they go to other properties, but yeah, if you have a chance you can check these out at your local Target or in your comic book stores. I believe they're actually worth a look. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye for now.